College football season is here. Less than a week, which means it is time for me to tell you which coaches are on the hot seat. Because there's nothing that screams college football more than fans chomping at the bits to just put their coach in the chopping block due to lofty expectations. So let's get into it. I have 3 categories today, each at a different level of red alert on how likely their coach is to get fired. The first category is doomsday. This is a category that basically means you're not getting out of the season unless you got some wild things to happen. It's not impossible, but I would say there's a 90% chance these coaches get fired. At number 1, I have UAB's Trent Dilfer. Most of us know him due to him being a Super Bowl winning quarterback, being on some TV shows, but he has now been the coach at UAB for 2 seasons. Last year, he finished a wonderful 3-9, and the year before that, 4-8. So he has 7-17 career record in those 2 seasons because this is the only 2 seasons he's ever coached. This is his first job. 0 bowl wins, obviously, only having 7 total wins, and it takes 6 to qualify for a bowl. The last 2 seasons were the Blazers' first 2 back-to-back losing seasons since 2013. So not a long time span, but long enough for a small university where they kind of actually have some expectations to win games. The program also reached back-to-back bowl wins before Dilfer reached there. So not only has he removed their winning streak, he's taken away their bowl wins. So not only is Dilfer underperforming on the field, he's also had some kind of rough press conferences. Nothing super controversial, but there was one time last year where people were questioning his winning and the roster building, and he quote unquote said, "It's not like we're Alabama." And for a small school in Alabama, it's true, but you don't want to hear that as a fan, as an athletic director. So I think Trent Dilfer is out of here this season. To me, the only way he can survive is if the schedule plays out kind of nice. Obviously, there are some tough games on the schedule at Navy, Tennessee, Army. Memphis and UConn were bowl winners last year. North Texas started off as a pretty good team. Tulsa has their time. But there are some winnable games with Alabama State, Akron, Florida Atlantic. So, they could probably squeeze out 5 wins again. Maybe get lucky for a bowl berth if there's not enough eligible teams. But overall, I think there's a very, very high chance they have another 3-win, maybe 4-win season, miss a bowl game, and Trent Dilfer is out of there. Next, we have Sam Pittman out of Arkansas. Now, Sam is a good example of how you can survive even if you're on a really, really hot seat. Because last year, after a 4-8 season in 2023, he was on this list again. But he went 7-6. He has a really young and exciting quarterback who, if he progresses well, could save his job again. And they made it to a bowl game after some upsets. So with the combination of those things, he was able to extend his career. He is 30-31 career record. All 5 seasons he's coached have been at Arkansas. So even though you're a bottom SEC team, you don't want to see your team going less than 500 through a 5-year sample season. You want to start creaking out some wins. You want to start developing some rosters. And like I said, they have a couple guys, but overall, if you look at the schedule, yes, they start off with Alabama, A&M, and Arkansas State, but then they're at Ole Miss, at Memphis, which is winnable, but it's not going to be easy. Notre Dame, Tennessee, Texas A&M, Auburn, Mississippi State, LSU, Texas, Missouri. So to me, if he wants to save his season, he's going to have to win all 3 of Memphis, Missouri, Mississippi State, or if he loses one of those games, he has to upset someone. I think 6 wins could save his season. It's a very tough schedule, but if he has 5 or less, and especially if some of these losses look really bad, I think Sam Pittman is out of there. Next, we have Sonny Cumbie out of Louisiana Tech. Another team that just has not performed how you would want. He's been there for 3 seasons, and they just don't win. They absolutely just do not win. Last year, 5-8. The year before, 3-9. He has a 13-29 career record, and part of that was at Texas Tech. He was the interim coach there for a little bit, had a couple wins. So honestly, half of those fucking wins aren't even at Louisiana Tech. And if the wins and the losses weren't enough, the AD has even come out and said he knows Cumbie is not universally celebrated, and the fans have been very, very critical online. So he doesn't have the backing of the university. the fans and has not been a product on the field that has shown he should stay around. So I think Cumbie, it's doomsday for him. He is not getting out of this. Next, we have Tony Elliott out of the University of Virginia, also spending his entire career there up to this point with 3 seasons. He's 11-23 in 3 seasons. No winning record, 5-7 and 3-9 the last 2 years. 0 bowl wins, obviously. It has just been a disastrous stretch of seasons for UVA, a team that has no power history of football, but they were starting to come on the rise a little bit, especially with Virginia Tech kind of falling off to an extent, but then Virginia fell right back off. Again, no winning season in his career. He is supposed to be an offensive-minded coach, maybe not an offensive guru, but up there. Yet they have the worst offense in the ACC. So I don't really know what you're getting with keeping him around. I think he is on the chopping block this year. Next and last on the doomsday list, I have Scott Satterfield out of Cincinnati. Now, he was probably the guy I was most tempted to put on the next list. So he's kind of a tweener, but I do think that Cincinnati is a program that had enough success for years there where they're going to be kind of stricter on who they keep around. As you can see, he was 5-7 last year to 3-9 the year before. Now, he does have an 80-56 career record, showing that at places like Louisville and App State, he was building legit programs, but the only thing is he hasn't done that here. He does have a 4-1 bowl record, but 0 in Cincinnati. This past 2 years of 8-16 is the worst 2-year stretch Cincinnati has since the 1990s. So yes, even though they're not a powerhouse program, they have expectations to win ball games. Like, they legit went from their best stretch of making a playoff game not that long ago to their worst stretch. So it's not like they were going from mediocre of like 6-7 wins, barely getting in bowl games, to 5-3 or 5 wins and 3 wins. It was they went from a playoff berth, even though it was kind of a fluky one, to 3 wins and then 5 wins. And another thing is the recruiting has gotten a lot worse too. Like, I know they're not going to be recruiting as well as Ohio State or Penn State, some of those other Midwest teams, but they still had a standard that they were getting with recruits, and that has fallen off since Satterfield has been there. The Big 12 is very deep, but it lacks a powerhouse team, so you would like to see them kind of creep their way to the top. And their schedule with Nebraska, Kansas, Iowa State, UCF, Oklahoma State, Baylor, Utah, Arizona, BYU, TCU. None of those games are unwinnable because the Big 12 just kind of somehow just keeps upsetting each other. But none of those games, besides like the Bowling Greens and the Northwestern states, you look at on your schedule and be like, oh, okay, that's a week we can just chalk up a win. So they could go legit 2 wins or they could have 8 wins. It's kind of all over the place. But I expect on the lower half of that ranking, and like I said, I think he's the closest thing on this list from not being a doomsday guy, but he is on a very, very hot seat. Now we get to the meat of our list, the middle tier, the win now or out. And I know that seems kind of obvious, but these are teams that have expectations to win and they can win. The last list, I don't see them winning many games this year, so I think it's guaranteed they're going to be out of there. This list, these teams can all have very good seasons, but the coaches have to piece it together, get their guys in order, and win some ball games. First is Oklahoma's Brent Venables. This is his 3rd season at Oklahoma, and he's only 22-17 overall. Now in 2023, he had a great year, 10-3. But now the first year in the SEC, Oklahoma went 6-7, and he has 0 bowl wins since being there. The biggest thing is the SEC, they moved there because they wanted more money, obviously, but they wanted higher fame, that SEC pedigree that the Big 12 wasn't getting them. And then you start 2-6 in the SEC in your first year. That is just something. And one of those wins was a crazy upset where Alabama forgot how to play football. So this team has struggled to be what they really are. And in fact, the AD has even come out and said they haven't met Oklahoma standards this last year at least, because obviously 2023 they did. And if you look at their schedule, there's not a lot of wins on this, the easy wins on this list. They have to play Michigan week 2. Now that Michigan team, kind of like Oklahoma, you don't really know if it's going to be old Michigan or Michigan from last year. Auburn's not going to be easy. They play Texas, at South Carolina, Ole Miss, at Tennessee, at Alabama, Missouri, LSU. So You look at that first half of the schedule, they really have to get probably 4 wins between Illinois State, Temple, Auburn, Kent State, or maybe Michigan. They really need 4 or 5 wins out of that first 5 games in order to have a relative schedule, because maybe you can sneak out 2 versus those bottom teams, but that won't be easy. So I think Brent Venables has a very, very steep climb in front of him to keep Oklahoma relevant, especially, they brought in John Napier, they brought in the new offensive coordinator, they brought in some other really good transfers and recruits. There's no excuse on talent. They have to win ball games this year, or Brent Venables is going to be looking for a new job. Next, we have Mike Norvell out of Florida State. Now, this is someone I really didn't want to put on this list, but I think he needs to be. Typically, going 13-1 will give you a long leash and a lot of slack. But going 2-10 the next season kind of cuts that leash back to where it could be. He's 71-43 in his career, so he has no problem winning games. But last year's collapse is just something that puts you automatically on a hot seat, especially since he doesn't really have much of a record of winning bowl games either. And I know they lost the 1 year when their quarterback went out, but still. Now, Florida State did bring in some good prospects, some good transfers. So their team, the new quarterback out of Boston College, the team is ready to perform well. They just need to click. And they had the talent last year too. It's not like, I know they weren't as talented as the year before. They lost a lot of guys in the NFL draft, but they were talented enough not to win 2 games. But you start a tough one off with Alabama, but then you got a couple easy wins in a row before Miami. Then you have your typical ACC schedule of Pittsburgh, Stanford, Wake Forest. You do have to play at Clemson. You do have to play at Florida. So it's not an easy schedule, but I don't think they need to go 9 or 10 wins to keep his job. I just think they have to maybe go 7, play a nice bowl game. I don't think it's the end of the world. I don't think it's impossible for him to have this kind of season he needs to keep his job. It's just he can't have another, they were one of the worst teams in the whole country last year. Not just record wise, but if you look at, their overall team statistical numbers of, offense, defense, efficiencies, they were just terrible. So they just can't do that this year, and he will keep his job. Next, we have one of the winningest coaches of all time in Brian Kelly. And I know that seems crazy. They haven't had bad seasons at LSU. 9-4 last year, 10-3, but it's the expectations that LSU carries in that program. Keep in mind, they were poised to make the playoffs last year. They were cruising, and then 3 of their 4 losses came in a 3-game losing streak in November to basically knock them out of the playoffs. So with that collapse, with the fact they have no playoff appearances under his belt, even though they've only had the 1 year where it was the 12-team league, but LSU still has expectations to go to playoffs in a 4 playoff setting, but especially 12. They have a stacked team this year. They really hit the transfer portal hard. They have one of the few returning starting quarterbacks of the SEC. They brought in some new receivers, new corners. They just have to go prove it on the field now. And it's a tough schedule too. You start your season at Clemson. 2 of your next 3 are easy. You play Florida, which won't be easy, but I think they could win that game at home. Then they start their stretch of at Ole Miss, South Carolina, Vanderbilt, Texas A&M, at Bama. Then you have Arkansas, Western Kentucky, and you finish at Oklahoma. So to be honest, for an SEC school, I think this is one of the easier schedules. They have a lot of their games at home. Obviously, the Clemson one's tough. The Bama one's tough. But, Arkansas and Vanderbilt being on your schedule helps some. You get a South Carolina. You get a Texas A&M at home. Those are definitely winnable games for this LSU team. So I don't think he's necessarily poised to automatically get fired, but the expectations are high enough where if he doesn't win, he's out. After 3 schools that have had really good success and are powerhouses, we have a team that used to have a lot of success, but really hasn't lived up to those expectations recently. That's one of the reasons we have Brent Pry at Virginia Tech up next. He has had 3 seasons at VT. Last year, 6-7. Year before, 7-6. So right around that bowl eligible number. 16-21 career record. That's not good. Virginia Tech, I know it's been a while, but they still have expectations to be one of the better teams in the country. They had a period there in the early to mid 2000s where they were up there as a top 5 school consistently. And yet recently they've just been a non-existent or non-relative team. And even the ACC, a conference that just isn't stacked top to bottom like the Big Ten or the SEC. And they had really high expectations just last year. A lot of people were picking them to be kind of a dark horse contender in the ACC, and then they finished 8th in there. And it's not just the record, the recruiting has been really bad. 41st in this class is not what you want to see. They're kind of losing their grip hold on Virginia. It's just nothing's really going right. I know a lot of fans are upset and just they're losing their patience. And their schedule is doable. Obviously, a very tough game in South Carolina to start it off. Vanderbilt's not easy, but at least it's at home. Then you have Dominion, Wofford. Those should be wins. NC State will be tough. Wake Forest. But then like Georgia Tech, California, Louisville, Florida State, Miami to almost end the schedule. Then you got your Civil War in Virginia. It's a doable schedule, but it's not a guaranteed easy schedule with what we've seen out of Virginia Tech of recent years. So Brent Pry has to really focus in the season, get his guys going, because he could definitely be out of here by the end of the season. The next guy on the list I hate seeing on here, but I think he has to be on it. It's Mike Gundy, the longest tenured coach in college football, if I'm not wrong. If he's either like 1 or 2, 20 seasons at Oklahoma State. But last year, 3-9. And Oklahoma State has a history of kind of being that third team in the Big 12. Obviously, they had their years where they were 1, but typically it was Texas and Oklahoma kind of running the Big 12. And then you had Oklahoma State kind of coming in, still competing, showing they're very close to the schools. So with them leaving, Oklahoma State was kind of poised to get a grip hold on this conference as the big dogs. But then you go 3-9, you don't even win a conference game last year. And I don't think his leash is so short. If he has a bad season, he's automatically out. But there's signs that he updated his contract and his buyout was lowered. And to me, that just screams on both sides that, hey, maybe it's time to wrap this up. We'll give it another shot. They didn't do much to improve their team from last year, which is another reason I'm not very hopeful. But we're giving it another shot. If it's a bad season, they're going to move on. Even the best of the best have to move on at some point, So Mike Gundy is definitely on a hot seat this year. Next, we have Luke Fickell. And I'm not going to lie, if there's one person on this list who I would put money to get fired, it's probably Luke Fickell. Wisconsin is a team that has expectations. They have a history of winning football games, and they just haven't been. Like, I know 2023 7-6 isn't terrible, but 5-7 last year, that's not Wisconsin standards, especially like a team that was always winning that kind of 10 games, but losing in the Big Ten championship game. Now with the playoff expansion, they should have expectations to at least make it to a playoff game. And yet they're just not doing it. Like, he has a history of winning. He spent a little bit at Ohio State. He got Cincinnati to where they were before Scott Satterfield kind of blew it up, and now Wisconsin, but they just have not met expectations. He has already had massive changes on the coaching staff, which is kind of a sign that coaches are like, hey, we got to figure out something different because I might be out here soon. If you look at their schedule, this is the reason I would bet on them to lose. It is tough. 2 easy wins, or should be easy wins at first, Miami and Middle Tennessee. Then they go at Bama, Maryland, which isn't bad, at Michigan, Iowa, at Ohio State, at Oregon, Washington, at Indiana versus Illinois, and then at Minnesota. So from Bama to Minnesota, you really only have 2 games there that I would say Wisconsin might be favored in. I'm not saying they can't win those upsets, but favored maybe Maryland and Minnesota. But that is a tough schedule. Luke Fickell, good luck this season. I just don't see you making it to next season as the Wisconsin head coach. Next, we have Justin Wilcox, the California coach. He has had 8 seasons there, and he has a 42-50 career record. 6-6 the past 2 seasons. So, I know Cal isn't a powerhouse, but they still have a history of winning games. He just doesn't. He has an under 500 record. And in fact, in 8 seasons, he's only had 2 winning seasons. So, I just don't get why anyone would have trust in him to have another winning season. I don't get why he would have any kind of long leash. And I think the biggest sign that he's probably out of here is, they brought in a new GM, Ron Rivera, former NFL head coach. He is going to be tough. He is not going to let, any lackluster happen. But NIL boosters are starting to hold contributions. The donors are saying, hey, we need to win games or you're not getting our money. And we know money speaks. So if he doesn't win, he's out. As simple as that. I'm not even going to drag on this one. He's going to be out if he doesn't win because money is involved. Next, we have Hugh Freeze. And I know he only has 2 seasons at Auburn, but 5-7 last year, 6-7 the year before. He is 0-4 against their big rivals of Alabama and Georgia. And I know typically Auburn is the 3rd team in that group, but they still have years where they compete and they win and they knock off Alabama. It just doesn't happen with Hugh Freeze though. He has had really good success in his career, but it was at Arkansas State, Ole Miss, Liberty. So obviously Ole Miss, that was tough SEC schedule as well, but most of his wins happen in smaller conferences, so he hasn't really proved it in the SEC very well. Now, they did have a massive offseason in recruiting, in the transfer portal. They brought in some really, really good players. So I think that one helps him that he has the roster he needs to compete in the SEC, at least for one of those last playoff spots, but it also ups the pressure. Talent isn't the question. He has it. So if he doesn't win, he's going to be out of here. And then last on this list is Dave Aranda out of Baylor. Now, I think Baylor will be really good this year, so I don't think he will get fired. But that doesn't change the fact he is on the list of win or out. 8-5 last year, but they started off 2-4. So at that 2-4 mark, they were, 5-12 within their last season and a half. Fans were calling for his name. They wanted his neck gone. But they rattled off 6 straight wins, go to a bowl game. They lost a bowl game, but Baylor really showed the promise that they have towards the second half of the season. But if they kind of fall flat in their face again, they might look at him as the reason that they can't get it together. They have the team. They have a great quarterback. They have the talent to compete in the Big 12 and honestly win it this year. So Baylor really needs to have that good season again, start off strong and show us what they have in the Big 12, a very winnable conference, or Dave Aranda is out. The next tier is the seat is getting hot, really hot. These are guys that I don't think necessarily are on the chopping block this year, but the expectations combined with what we're seeing on the field could lead to it. First, we have Lincoln Riley at USC, one of the more big name coaches we have in college football nowadays. He has regressed in wins every year he's been there, going 7-6 last year, the first year in the Big Ten. Again, kind of similar to like an Oklahoma, they moved because they wanted that more prestigious conference and they just got further away from the playoffs, if anything. Now, winning games hasn't been a problem for Riley. He's 81-24 in his career. He already has 2 bowl wins with USC, so it's not like he has no success, but again, it's the expectations that a USC has, especially when, you see poor defense, and I know he's an offensive guy, but poor defense through the Trojans and a lot of late game collapses that we've seen that the ADs and the donors and everyone contributing doesn't want to see us blow games. Recruiting has also been overall disappointing for such a big school. He's hit the transfer portal pretty well, but the local recruiting hasn't been top tier. And obviously, if you're USC, recruiting shouldn't be a problem. So Riley is not necessarily on the chopping block, but the seat is hot enough he could find himself there. Next is a guy who I personally don't think should end up being on the chopping block or being fired, assuming he doesn't have some just massive collapse, which I don't think they will. But that's Kalen DaBoer at Alabama. Now, 9-4. They were like the first or second team out of the college football playoffs last year. So it's not like they had a bad season. And obviously he's proven at Washington he can win at a big school and go deep in a playoff run, losing in a championship game versus Michigan 2 years ago. But again, the problem is the expectations that Bama has. After all those years of Nick Saban, after all those championship games, Bama expects to be an elite top tier school. And while Bama was very good last year, there was a lot of problems with lack of focus, the blowout versus Oklahoma where they just couldn't score and they couldn't stop the run. There was just a lot of bad moments last year that even though 9-4 on the outside looks fine, when you look at how they got there, the loss versus Vanderbilt, to be honest, they should have been a playoff team. If you just clean up that Vanderbilt and the bad loss to Oklahoma, all of a sudden you're in the SEC championship game, So I think DaBoer is definitely on the hot seat. They have the talent. They have all the resources they need. They're there's just so high expectations that he's going to be on the hot seat immediately in the job. And that's what happened. Next, I have Billy Napier. And to be honest, he probably should have been on the tier before this, but I think last year's resurgence and how the team's looking this year, I think he's kind of saved himself another year, assuming they can just at least have a relatively good year. He was on the list of guys that were probably a doomsday list last year because of, they went 5-7. Their schedule was brutal, but they were 8-5 last year. They were a really good team. The schedule is again very hard this year, but I think they have a talent. Obviously, DJ Langway is a big part of that. He seems to love Billy Napier, so that's a big part of how I think he won't really be on the chopping block unless something really bad happens. They were able to get a one bowl win under his tenure. He has a good career of winning games. I don't think that Florida, even if they don't have the best season they could have, I don't think they end up being so bad where he gets cut or fired, but I do think it's possible because the seat is still hot. And then last on the list is kind of more like an honorable mention. It's Sherrone Moore out of Michigan. I don't think Michigan wants to keep changing coaches after everything that happened with Harbaugh. So I don't think they're not going to look for a reason to fire Moore. The reason I put him on this list, though, is because of all the controversy, with the Harbaugh. Moore is going to get suspended again. They got fined a ton of money, $20 million. There's so much controversy going on this university. If the season is underwhelming, like it was last year, it wasn't a bad season, but it was underwhelming. I could see them just wanting to clear the house completely of the old tenured coaching staff. They'll find a new coach, a whole new coaching staff from a whole new branch of guys just to clean slate it. So I don't think they're actively looking to do that, but if the season's underwhelming, I think Moore's seat at the head coaching spot is hot because of all that. But I think they will give him a chance.